Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Books and Books in Coral Gables. Thank you all for coming down tonight. This evening, Books and Books is very happy to present Mr. Jonathan Allen and Ms. Amie Parnes and their new book, HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. Mr. Allen is the White House Bureau Chief for Politico, an award-winning reporter. He has also written extensively about Congress and national politics, and he appears frequently as a political analyst on national television news programs. Ms. Parnes is the White House correspondent for The Hill newspaper in Washington, where she covers the Obama administration. A 10-year veteran of political journalism, she traveled with the Clinton, Obama, and McCain campaigns while covering the 2008 presidential race for Politico. Hillary Clinton's surprising defeat in the 2008 Democratic primary brought her to the nadir of her political career. And yet, 6 years later, she has reemerged as an even more powerful and influential figure, a formidable stateswoman, and the presumed frontrunner for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination, marking one of the great political comebacks in history. Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Jonathan Allen and Ms. Amie Parnes.
I want to thank you guys all so much for being here. This is probably my most favorite stop that we're doing of the entire tour because it's my hometown and I have so many good friends here. I want to point a few out. Well, first, my dad is in the back. Hi, Dad. A couple of my best friends are here, Craig Bodie and Dolly Hernandez back there on the left. My first professional editor, John O'Neill, back there. Say hi, John. The woman who started it all in my journalism path, my 6th grade English teacher, Mickey Lipton, right there. And my best friend Jara's parents are here, so I'd like to acknowledge them too. And friends from all around. My friend Marissa Leichter from Spanish River High.
I want to thank everybody who's not related to Amie in one way or another for coming. I appreciate it. This is, I think, a little turned up. I wonder if I can. Is that better?
Oh, my aunt and uncle back on this end, too. Sorry, I'll stop now.
A little louder?
Please.
Okay. All right. Louder.
Thank you.
All right. So, and as I was saying, I'd like to thank everybody that's not related to Amie. Are you finding anybody else? I think her first nanny might be here somewhere. If you came out to see Hillary Clinton, I apologize. She will not be appearing tonight. But we hope that we captured her in the book. So please enjoy reading. We're very grateful to the folks at Books and Books. I have not been here before. I am totally impressed by this bookstore, and now want to move to Miami so that I have something like this to come to. So it's really nice to see a great institution like this where people can still browse the bookshelves in peace and find good stuff to read.
So I think what we want to do is basically tell you a little bit about the book, and then read a little from the book, and then do a little Q&A, if that's okay.
That works with you guys. Is that all right? So we basically decided in 2012 that there was a really good story to be told about Hillary Clinton's political comeback. There had been a lot of political reporting on the 2008 campaign, and particularly after the campaign, her story sort of dropped off a little bit. It was less interesting than the Barack Obama story or the Obama-McCain story or the Sarah Palin on HBO story. And what we decided was there was this really interesting story to be told about her political comeback over the course of the previous, when we decided to do this in mid-2012, basically over the course of the previous 4 or so years. We wanted to figure out what it was that had positioned her again to run for president. We thought that would be interesting to people, particularly if she does in fact run or even becomes president. We thought that it was important to figure out how she makes decisions, what her priorities are, who she puts around her, how she dealt with various difficulties, including going to work for the person who beat her, including this incredible political relationship and personal relationship with Bill Clinton, the former president. How did that all work out? And so that was the sort of genesis of the book. And we fairly early on met with some people who were close to Hillary Clinton to talk to them about what we wanted to do for the book. And their reaction was, "What do you mean comeback story? She was never down." They rejected the whole idea. That said, very early on, they also agreed to cooperate with us to a large extent. Not everybody we wanted to talked to us, but most of them did. And we were able to, I think, get inside her inner circle in a way that that other authors have not been able to do before, and most reporters are not able to do. And we hope that that's something that's illuminating for you guys. I'll let Amie talk a little bit about her perspective on how all this came together.
Well, I think you did a really good job doing
sorry.
that. But no, I think I'll tell you guys this because you are the hometown crowd. But we might have spoken to the woman herself, I should say. You can draw some assumptions by reading the book and seeing new passages and seeing her thoughts on various subjects, all fresh, all to us. And I think what we wanted to do is just read you a little part of it. You want to kick it off?
Sure. I want to find the place. And we picked a passage where we felt like it didn't really need a whole lot of background or context. If you guys are having trouble with my mic and the feedback, just raise your hand and I'll try to modulate a little bit. This is the beginning of a chapter called Bloom Where You're Planted. In the spring of 2009, Obama's vetting team gathered, as it often did, in White House counsel Greg Craig's wood-paneled corner office on the second floor of the West Wing. In lunchtime sessions, the small set of senior aides typically shuffled through the paperwork of as many as 15 job candidates. On this day, one name conjured such searing memories from the campaign trail that it stood out from all the others: Capricia Marshall. The West Wing crew considered Marshall, a staunch Hillary loyalist, to be an enemy combatant. Like many of the women who surround Hillary, Marshall is graceful, disciplined, and down-home brassy. A brunette with a chic short haircut and highlights, the half-Croatian and half-Mexican Marshall, who favored rigorous P90X workouts, went way back with the Clintons. Marshall had been one of Hillary's closest confidants in Washington since becoming the youngest White House social secretary in memory following Bill's 1992 campaign. When Hillary suspended her own quest for the presidency in June 2008, she entrusted Marshall with running her political action committee at a time when some Democrats feared that Hillary might make a final play for the nomination at the convention. Back then, the animosity between the two camps had run so deep that Hillary's face was bulletin board material in the Obama scheduling office. They had all these unflattering pictures of her, said one source who saw the display, kind of the sports locker room mindset. Even after the primary was decided, Marshall had been in charge of sensitive projects like recruiting staff to count late delegates from the Texas Party Convention to make sure Hillary won her fair share. But no single Marshall sin stood out in the minds of Obama's aides so much as a general view that she embodied the hated Hillary land. The president's team had acquiesced when Hillary chose Cheryl Mills as her chief of staff, and with even greater hesitancy, Philippe Reines as her senior advisor. They were members of Hillary's personal staff, and thus entirely within her domain. But Hillary picked Marshall to be the nation's chief protocol officer, a position that carried with it the coveted prestige of an ambassador's rank and a reserved seat on Air Force One anytime the president traveled abroad. Not only would Hillary's gal pal have a lot of face time with Obama, she'd be taking up a high-profile spot in the administration that could have gone to a friend of the president. There was another red flag on her nomination. Generally, vetting issues ran the gamut, from serious ethical lapses to DUI charges, and occasionally embarrassing associations. One nominee had been photographed with Lisa Ann, the porn film actress who played the title character in a Hustler-produced video called Who's Nailin' Palin? Marshall's problem was a little less lascivious than that, but troubling all the same. She hadn't filed a tax return in 2005 or 2006. She rectified the omission in the fall of 2008, around the time it became clear that Hillary might take a job in the administration. As it turned out, Marshall was entitled to refunds in those years. Still, tax issues had beset several Obama nominees, including Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner and Tom Daschle, and the White House had little appetite for yet another tax cheat storyline. As a vetting attorney from the Justice Department read a 3-page memo on Marshall aloud, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Jim Messina and Deputy Communications Director Dan Pfeiffer grew visibly agitated in their upholstered wingback chairs, as did Obama campaign veterans around the room. By all rights, this job was a plum that should be going to an Obama loyalist, not to Marshall, and not if it meant defending yet another nominee against questions about improper tax filings. Pfeiffer in particular thought, quote, it was going to be a press problem at a time when we had been through a lot of confirmation issues with Daschle and Geithner. They reacted viscerally. F no. Actually, they used the word. She was a complete B, if you know what that word means, during the campaign. I hope I didn't offend your virgin ears. And worse.
Marshall's combination of experience with White House-level social planning and her closeness to Hillary made her a natural selection for the job. But Obama's aides didn't see it that way. No one in the room spoke up to defend her. Not Legislative Affairs Specialist Sean Kennedy, who would have to get Marshall confirmed by the Senate if she was nominated. Not Personnel Director Nancy Hogan. Not Ethics Czar Norm Eisen. Not Greg Craig, who along with Senator Richard Blumenthal had been a study buddy of Bill Clinton and Hillary Rodham in the days when Bill cooked up his mama's fried chicken to serve to guests, debating the Vietnam War in the future first couple's apartment near the Yale Law School. Craig's alignment with Obama had been a major betrayal during the campaign. Aides close to Obama say it was less that they were against Marshall than that they wanted one of their trusted own in the high-profile role. It was, we should have our person. We need our person, said one senior White House aide familiar with the discussions on Marshall. It would have been the equivalent of the roles being reversed if Hillary was president and us cutting a deal that Desiree Rogers or Valerie Jarrett would be protocol officer, the aide said. When you think of it that way, it's like, why would they ever want one of us traveling with them? The vetting process worked in such a way that by the time a job candidate reached the team in Craig's office, he or she was only hopeful under immediate consideration. It was up or down on Marshall. If Obama rejected her, another candidate would be lined up in the same way, a process that could take weeks or months. Publicly, the Obama and Clinton camps claimed they had put the primary behind them. But here, huddled in Craig's office, where the bookcases were still empty, and the only personal effect was a Robert F. Kennedy poster on the wall, the truth poured out. The two sides didn't understand each other, they didn't like each other, and they didn't trust each other. The president's aides didn't have another candidate in mind when Messina asked his colleagues to cast their votes, but they were certain they didn't want Marshall. One by one, each aide extended a fist with the thumb pointed down. But then Messina, a strawberry blonde Montanan whose soft voice takes the edge off his often profane vocabulary, delivered some bad news to the team. I agree, he said, but this is very clearly an HRC pick and needs to be raised with the president. Typically, skirmishes over lower-level aides were resolved when either Mills or Obama's aides backed down, rather than kicking the decision up the command chain. Obama's team tried to draw a line in the sand on Marshall, a proxy for Hillary. It was one of the rare occasions when a personnel fight ended up at Obama's door. This was a test case and a watershed moment in a brutal months-long fight between the White House and state over Hillary's power to pick her team, according to one of the bettors. Marshall had a secret weapon in another cousin of Valerie Jarrett, Anne Marchant, who had worked as a special assistant to the president in the Clinton White House. Marchant lobbied Jarrett on Marshall's behalf, describing her strengths and skills and encouraging Jarrett to prod the president. Hillary went to bat for Marshall, too. The White House team didn't fully appreciate the role of a chief protocol officer and what went into it, she thought. It wasn't some glorified advanced staffer or a donor with little experience in Washington. There's nobody better to do this job, Hillary told Obama. She's got the experience from the social office. She's got a great touch and feel for helping organize people. She'll be fabulous. Hillary had also gone the rounds with the president's aides. No, I'm telling you this is the right person, she had said. You will know that I am right after you've worked with her for a month. And Hillary knew she held the trump card. "The president told me I could pick the people in the State Department, and this is my pick," she said. "So let's move forward."
And just as a little coda to that, that woman, Capricia Marshall, ended up, when Nelson Mandela died recently, she had already left the State Department, as had Hillary Clinton. Obama asked her to come back and serve as chief protocol officer just for that trip, because he felt she had done such a good job on big items. It was a moment where Hillary's advice that had proved prophetic, that the Obama people would actually come to really see her person as somebody who could effectively execute the job. So,
yeah.
There are a lot of little stories like that in the book, a lot of vignettes about various inside the room situations, some of them directly involving Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, the various people around them. What we tried to do was tell the narrative story in a way that was interesting and followable, and sort of cut out the extra stuff that makes big, long historical books boring. So hopefully we achieved some of that. We like that particular passage just because it shows some of the tension. I think it's easy to forget when you see Obama and Clinton on stage together now. Sometimes it's easy to forget just how much particularly their staffs hated each other, not just after the campaign, but even once Obama and Clinton were in office together. And there's a lot of that. In fact, there's one... The ghosts of Miami. There's in fact a whole chapter called "Us and Them" about how Hillary Clinton continued to refer to her people as us and Barack Obama's as them, even as she was going into the State Department. So,
but I hope I'm not ruining anything by saying that a few chapters later, we kind of bring it back full circle, and we have a scene where President Obama invites Secretary of State Clinton into his office aboard Air Force One, and they sit down, and he basically asks her if she wants to stay another term, and that sort of, it comes full circle. But in between, we describe stories about how they came together. There's a scene in Copenhagen where they stormed a secret meeting together, and both aides on both sides say that was the pivotal moment where it kind of turned, where they both agreed. The Chinese were having a meeting. The Americans weren't invited. President Obama turns to the secretary and says, "Let's go. Let's do this." They storm this meeting, and this Chinese official storms up to them and is like, "What are you guys doing here?" in Chinese or something. And President Obama turns to Hillary Clinton and says, "I don't know what this guy is telling us, but it isn't. We're glad to see you."
And yeah, what Amie was saying before about aboard Air Force One, we were the first to report that as she was leaving office after the 2012 election, that Obama had asked her to stick around, and she turned him down repeatedly on Air Force One. I think she said she was basically ready to get out of there, and maybe that's because she wanted to get out of public service, or maybe it's because she knew that more time as Secretary of State could leave her more vulnerable in a 2016 run if bad things happened, or maybe she wanted to make some money, which she's doing now in speeches. I think if you guys would like to ask questions, I think that might be, we like to interact, so as opposed to just talking at you. Yeah.
Were you in the Hillary's hip pocket? Because this is so detailed, it's great. And have you heard anything from Hillary about the book itself?
We were not in her hip pocket, but I really appreciate the detail comment.
We know she has the book. Her aides participated. This is as close as an authorized biography, I think, as you can get. They participated all along. But we did also talk to people who didn't like her, which you'll find in the book. There's Darrell Issa, the congressman, Jason Chaffetz, the congressman, who both despise her. Although Darrell Issa says some very nice things about her in the book.
I think what we found is that even within the realm of Washington, even her adversaries give her credit for working very hard. They give her credit for being serious about politics and policy. So even the people who are investigating her, and we talked to them at length, are give her marks for certain things. They'll give her an inch here, an inch there, which we find, we found interesting. We were a little surprised. We were a little surprised by that. Poltergeists. Are the Clinton people listening in?
They might be.
So, did you say it was an unauthorized biography?
It is unauthorized, but I think what Amie was trying to say is that the access that we got, it was really, I think, remarkable for a book about somebody who really doesn't give a lot of access to the press.
Yeah.
And what Amie was saying at the beginning, you will find a lot of quotes from Hillary Clinton in this book. I will wink and nod and tell you that I can't confirm or deny that we spoke to her, but you will find a lot of quotes from Hillary Clinton in this book that don't appear anywhere else.
Has there been feedback from her aides or from others besides her?
There has. There's been a little bit of a division. What we've found, generally speaking, is that Bill Clinton's people are very unhappy.
Really?
And her people have, there are some things that they don't like, but they have been less quick to let us know that they were unhappy with things. And I think part of that is that they were, fairly well aware. I mean, I think one of your responsibilities as a reporter is when you have something that you're writing about somebody that they're not going to like, that you talk to them and find out what it is they think about that thing. And so as a result of that, I don't think there were a lot of surprises for them. I mean, I think they were aware of the things that they weren't going to like that were going to be in the book.
What we did is we worked very closely with them, and we let them know. Even there's an enemies list at the start of the book, for instance, that they did not care for both sides. But they knew about the enemies list. They knew we had it for months and months and months, and we asked them about it, and we asked them specifics about it. So it's not like anything in this book shocked them. We were very fair about our approach.
Why particularly did Bill's people dislike the book?
I think part of it, I don't know that they dislike the whole book. I do know that they let us know that there were certain things that they didn't like very quickly and in not so nice fashion, and that they internally there were some recriminations for people that talked to us. So that's we can tell you that. I mean, we're not writing stories about it right now, but but that's some of what we got. I think the big thing was we follow sort of the trajectory of Bill Clinton as well as the trajectory of Hillary Clinton, and he basically took back the reins of the family's political operation. During 2008, she was the politician, and once she was in the State Department, he went about the business of settling scores. Now, some of that is positive, where he goes and helps people that were helpful to her in 2008, and some of that is negative. And we go through some of the races, congressional elections, where he went out on the campaign trail for the opponents of people he thought had done her wrong. One by one, kind of picking them off, and that's not a story that his people want out there. I mean, it just doesn't look good. It's not unusual in politics, and as far as retribution goes in politics, nobody really cares. I should say nobody cares. Few people care if you go knock out another congressman, as opposed to exacting retribution against the public or doing things that have a negative consequence for the public. But I do think they didn't like that portrayal at all. It is an accurate portrayal. Nobody has challenged any of that portrayal. And in fact, we went about very meticulously, I think, detailing how they put together their hit list. How aides put together the hit list at the end of the 2008 campaign and rated all the members of Congress on the Democratic side as to whether they were friends or enemies and what degree of friend or enemy they were. And in some cases, interestingly, the thing that people were found most guilty of was neutrality. They were very angry people they thought they had done favors for who were neutral in 2008. It was almost worse than being for Obama, was being somebody that Clintons thought they had a relationship with, and then you were neutral. I'm not an expert on Dante, but he wrote something to the effect of there's a special place, or the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who declare neutrality in times of trouble. I'm totally butchering Dante, but something, I think that's sort of the motivating influence that, or the animating influence of what Bill Clinton went and did on the campaign trail. And of course, as a result of that, Democrats now in 2016, or looking at the 2016 race, are a little more reluctant to support people other than Hillary Clinton, because they're worried that 2, 3, 4 years down the road, Bill Clinton's going to show up in their congressional district raising money for their opponent or endorsing their opponent. We should say he did this in primaries. He didn't go and show up for Republicans against Democrats, but he did knock out several Democrats. In fact, there's a new Florida resident, Jason Altmaier. We go into his story in detail. He was a Pennsylvania congressman a couple years ago now. He's a Florida resident working as, he's working for one of the healthcare companies down here, but no longer in office, courtesy of Bill Clinton.
And Bill Clinton, we have an anecdote in the book where he sees Jason Altmaier a couple of years later and he says, "I'll never forget the people who supported Hillary."
He just kind of
and he stares at him. So,
as in, you're not one of them.
Right.
Well, I'm going to ask the elephant in the room question. In your educated opinion, is she going to run?
I'll say, in this crowd, yes. 100%
Is she
take it
gonna
to the
run?
bank.
The question was, will Hillary Clinton run for president in 2016? The way that we treat it in the book, and I think the way we both feel about it is, and I think we lay out the case for this in the book, is that she has been running since 2008 for 2016. And we go sort of detail the things that she does. And look, all politicians who see a future for themselves or a potential future for themselves do the same things to leave their options open, to build their political strength. So it's not unusual in any way, but we sort of go through the ways in which she did that, including after the 2008 election, she sent out 16,000 thank you notes to people who supported her. If you didn't think you might run for president again, I mean...
5,000 of them handwritten, by the way. So, where she actually touched a piece of paper.
And, she did some fundraising for State Department ventures, or her people did fundraising for State Department ventures while she was there. The World Expo in Shanghai, for instance, where basically they're tapping into the Clinton donor network to build a pavilion at the Shanghai Expo because the government had decided not to do World's Fairs anymore, for the U.S. to not participate. There was a loophole, and she drove a truck through that loophole. But by doing that, she maintains contact with all of her donors and even reaches out to new ones in the business community. So I think if you read the book, you sort of get the feeling this is somebody who is building the political operation all the time. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, did you ever find out how she felt Ted Kennedy and Carolyn Kennedy endorsed Obama, even though they were best of friends? And how did she feel after she felt she was betrayed?
She did. She felt really slighted by it, and we talk about it. Ted Kennedy was a 7 on this hit list that her aides crafted. Ones were devoted to people who were friends and who supported her. And they went all the way to 7. And 7 was the worst you could get. It was the people who basically betrayed her. Ted Kennedy, John Kerry, 7s. They felt like Ted Kennedy's endorsement of Obama came at the worst time. It was right in the middle where she really needed it. She needed his support. They had done so much also to support Ted Kennedy that they felt like this was like a total stab in the back.
They had devoted somebody, and I'm not entirely sure this made it into the book. It might have been on the cutting room floor, so consider this a little bonus. They had when Bill Clinton was in the White House and Ted Kennedy was running for re-election in 1994. You might remember he faced this sort of young financial guy named Mitt Romney, and Ted Kennedy at the time was very worried about Mitt Romney. Kennedy had been older; he'd gained some weight. He was famous for carousing in Washington. And he was worried that this guy, Mitt Romney, might pour a lot of money into this race and beat him. The White House devoted a staffer to making sure that Ted Kennedy got reelected. Bill and Hillary Clinton both went to Massachusetts to campaign for him. So when Hillary Clinton was running in 2008, she thought, for sure, Ted Kennedy's going to be helpful. And then when he wasn't, they begged him to just stay on the sidelines. And he didn't do it. Not only that, but if you'll remember the endorsement that he gave for Barack Obama took some pretty strong shots at Bill Clinton in not very veiled terms. So they were furious with Ted Kennedy, and I don't think they ever got over that. I mean, he's obviously not with us anymore. That was a huge division within the Democratic Party.
Between Richardson and Kennedy, they really felt like they had been knifed in the back.
Yeah.
I mean, this was something that was expected. When her daughter, Caroline, got up to endorse Obama, I almost fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, they were stunned by it. They were upset by it. It was harmful to her campaign, not just from the standpoint of an endorsement, but this is the the sort of Democratic Party royalty taking the mantle off their shoulders and handing it to Barack Obama. And I don't know that Bill Clinton and Ted Kennedy are such opposites as politicians. Kennedy very much the liberal and the sort of a lion of ideology within the Democratic Party. Bill Clinton the sort of party builder and more of the transactional at times, and more of the what do we do to get things done to move it forward, whether or not it's my ideology perfectly. So in some ways it might not be totally surprising. Back in 1980, I'm really going way back, Ted Kennedy was running against Jimmy Carter, as you know, in the primary, and Kennedy really wanted to pick up this young Southern governor, Bill Clinton, get him on his side. And Carter had done some things that were hurtful to Bill Clinton, who was then the governor of Arkansas, including a refugee. There was a refugee issue that was really bad for Bill Clinton. At any rate, Kennedy wanted Clinton to come to his side, and Clinton was like, "I'm sticking with the party's president." And it tells you a little bit of the difference between the two of them.
But other people like Claire McCaskill, she endorsed President or Senator Obama at the wrong time for the campaign too. She was one of the first early women senators who supported him, and so she also got a 7. There were plenty of other people that pissed them off.
If there's anybody that Clinton's really, really despised during that period, it was Claire McCaskill, and she has now endorsed Hillary Clinton not once but twice. She put out an endorsement, got picked up by a small paper at home. Nobody else picked it up. And so she came out again a few months later and re-endorsed Hillary Clinton for an election 4 years down the road, obviously trying very hard to work herself back into the Clinton's good graces.
Do you find any trouble with political dynasty? Because I look at the presidency of George W. Bush and see some of what happened during his presidency. You can reach back to when his father was president, and it seems like he was refighting some of the old battles that his father had done. So once Hillary runs and she becomes president, do those long memories and all of those old enemies and old friends, is that something? What's your thought?
I think they're already facing some baggage. I mean, you're seeing this already with Hillary and these Hillary papers that came out recently, and Monica's name being conjured again. But I think that their ratings, his ratings and her ratings, their approval ratings were so high after post-Monica, which people don't really remember. But he left with like a 70-something% approval rating. So, there's like a conflict right now in the Republican Party. Like, do we fight them on this? Do we bring up the past? And I think, some people are saying, yeah, everything counts and let's do that. And some people are saying, no, like Karl Rove basically says, there's so much that we could focus on right now. Why are we focused on the past?
And I think to the question of governance, once you get in, yes, that does happen. I don't know that it just happens with a political dynasty of one family, where they go after these old wars and they keep fighting the same battles and they try to settle scores. I think you see that from party to party. Whenever there's a new Republican president following a Democratic president, they try to institute the Republican policies of the past, and the Democrats do the same. And I think that's why a lot of the public is frustrated with the two-party system sometimes, because it doesn't seem to ever move. I'll give you an example. Just today or last night, the White House announced that they're going to do some things with overtime pay rules. This is kind of arcane stuff, but George Bush did some stuff with overtime pay rules, and what he did is he did stuff the Democrats didn't like. In fact, Barack Obama did something in the state Senate in Illinois to try to block what Bush was doing. Well, when Barack Obama comes into office, he tries to readjust them into the way the Democrats like them better. And you go back decades, and you could probably see Nixon and Johnson doing the same sort of back and forth on, I don't know, on overtime rules specifically, but I do think that's an issue. And I would also say, of that question of dynasties, we may get to investigate it really, really deeply as a people.
Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton.
I think there's a reasonable chance we will see that. She's like praying
really
for that
hoping
political
for
story. Yes. Anna.
So what do you think are her biggest vulnerabilities as a candidate?
It's a great question.
I mean, just hypothetically, if you were advising somebody thinking of running against her?
Should we identify who Anna is? Should we call you out?
Anna is a brilliant political strategist. Is that fair enough?
Yeah. We'll leave it there.
So So there are a few that I think are really outstanding. So one, I think that there is a tendency in her and the people around her to fight the last war, to learn the lessons of the past campaign too well, and not necessarily look forward and figure out what the next campaign will look like. I think in 2008 they were rerunning 1996. Bill Clinton was still getting information by fax in 1996.
True story. Really.
True story. So I think, and so now they know that technology was a problem for them in 2008. Maybe they'll be better on that next time. But I do think there's a tendency to run old races, and I think that's just terrible for any candidate running old races. You should learn from the lessons from the past, but not be stuck in it. I also think there's some vulnerability on the vision question in general. I think the argument for her in 2008 was, I'm the most experienced, maybe the most qualified, but there was never an articulated vision of where she wanted to take the country. And I think that's something that is part and parcel in a little bit of the sort of Clintonian worldview of triangulation or consensus or whatever you want to call it. When you compromise a lot, and that's what you're good at and what you look to do, sometimes it's hard to articulate the vision of where you're going to take people. So I think that's a potential problem for her. And I think people being tired of Bush Clinton is also a problem for her. I do think, though, that she's better positioned in 2016 than she was in 2008. I think there's a tendency to want to look at the parallels and say, well, she was the front runner then, and she's the front runner now. So of course somebody's going to come up and jack her, and take her out on the Democratic primary. That could happen, but I don't see a Barack Obama candidate on the Democratic side right now. And I also think in the super PAC era, the people that she raises money from, who were limited to $4,600 contributions by campaign finance rules in 2008, who can now give millions of dollars, really changed the game for the other candidates who can't tap those same donors on Wall Street or Los Angeles or other places.
But I think one thing that she did was she called her aides into her office and at home after 2008, and she said, what did we do wrong here? How did we go wrong in this campaign? So I think she did learn her lessons. She learned how Barack Obama beat her in technology. She learned that she should have embraced the fact that she was a woman candidate a little more than she did. And I think that if she runs in 2016, that you see her not kind of run around in dresses, but really embrace the fact that she is a woman candidate, and that that this is a historic campaign, and that's something he did very effectively in 2008.
And we sort of go into that deeply in the book, by the way.
Her running must be a big disappointment to Biden.
I'm sorry?
Her running must be a big disappointment to Biden, vice president.
Yeah, if she runs, I think Biden obviously would like to be president of the United States. He's been thinking about that for, 40 years or so.
Yeah, he must be devastated.
I think Democrats would like him, maybe some Democrats would like him to be permanent vice president.
I think he is, though. I think he is a little hurt. I mean, you think about a guy who was set up to be president. Most vice presidents go on and they run for office, but I think she's not going to, she's going to kill him if they run against each other.
She's an amazing woman. She's amazing.
To that point, I recently asked Jay Carney, the White House press secretary. I said, Joe Biden was, according to Barack Obama, the second best person in the country to be president in 2008. And then again in 2012, he went around the country and said, this is the person who should stand in if something should happen to me. And now that Barack Obama isn't on the stage for 2016, he hasn't endorsed Joe Biden, which is interesting. And I said to Carney, what gives? Is he no longer the next best person from Barack Obama in Barack Obama's mind? And he declined to answer that question.
This is my elementary school principal.
Okay. If you don't answer right, you're being held out for class.
Exactly.
With Obama's rating at an all-time low, according to the paper today, how do you think that is going to affect Hillary's future?
I think she distances herself a little bit from him. And there are some things that tie them together, like healthcare. We actually report for the first time in this book that she did have her fingerprints on healthcare, that she was actively pushing for it, although the public didn't know about it. But there was one particular cabinet meeting where she basically said, you guys, we really need to do this right now. This is our time. She remembered what happened in her husband's time, and she said, this is our time. You know, we control both houses. You know, and the cabinet secretaries were kind of on the fence. They were all pushing for their own issues. And she said, no, this is it. And she also talked to lawmakers behind the scenes and said, we have to rally around this. And you're already seeing Republicans take this passage out of our book and circulate it and say, you know, she claimed she wasn't behind it, but she was behind it. And the GOP, I mean, the Republican National Committee is sending out that passage from the book.
And I think in your question and in your answer are two more answers to your question, which are the vulnerability on health care. Barack Obama's health care law is not that dissimilar to what Hillary Clinton was pushing in 2008 on the campaign trail. It's something that we've now shown she was working on behind the scenes to help him do. So I think that is potentially a vulnerability. We don't know how that's all going to play out, but there are all sorts of minefields in that law, or mines in that law that are going to blow up.
You'll be hearing lots of Hillary care in the future. That's my prediction.
You know, just as an example, Medicare Advantage is facing cuts. I know some of you are probably familiar with that program. You know, that's going to be a problem politically if there are Medicare Advantage cuts that happen this year, next year, the year after that, to help pay for the core Obamacare. I think that you'll end up seeing a lot of people who don't like that. So that's one thing, and then and just being tied to Barack Obama could be a huge vulnerability, as you point out. So two more answers. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just regarding the thank you notes. I'm not naive. I know she's a politician, but a personal vignette. My daughter, when she was a junior in college, she was an intern for Hillary Clinton in Hillary's press office. And we were there in the executive office building on the day of Ron Brown's funeral. And Capricia came up to us and said, my daughter said, don't talk to anybody, don't look at anybody, don't speak to anybody, because she had to leave us for a few minutes.
So your daughter does protocol too?
Right, at large, And so we said, could we meet, Mrs. Clinton? Well, she came over and she called the White House photographer, and she was just lovely and very down to earth. And my daughter, what part of her job was to bring up negative press clippings to the residents, and so I know. But she slipped in a personal thank you note because Hillary had been so gracious to us, really. And weeks later, Hillary came to her press office and went up to our daughter and thanked her for the thank you. Now, come on.
Look, we heard so many stories of her finding out that somebody's mother was sick, and all of a sudden, Clinton.
It became a joke, actually. John and I would look at each other and laugh because everyone had a story. Like, my uncle was really sick, and he got a note from her 2 days later.
Or she called doctors and arranged arranged things for them at hospitals that they might not have otherwise been able to get into, and not necessarily people that were politically close to her or donors, but people that worked for her at the State Department. Everybody we talked to had some story like that. So at some point we decided that they were being coached to at least tell the story. Not that the story wasn't true, but it was literally everyone we talked to. No, of course not. No. But my point is that, look, and it matters, right? It matters. You will never forget that. Your daughter will never forget that, and it's good politics.
But it wasn't. My daughter was a junior in college. Come on.
I mean, it was just the nature. I think.
Was she thinking your daughter was going to vote for her for president at that time? No, I doubt it. But I do think that it is something that look. The best way to be good at politics is to come off as and to be a good person.
But I think she's genuine.
And it's something President Obama struggles with, actually. You always hear that he's a little too aloof, that he doesn't know how to connect with people, he doesn't know how to work the system and talk to lawmakers. And it's something that the Clintons have, and it's something that he lacks. So they're almost like a different breed of politicians.
And I don't mean to suggest that it's not genuine, I just mean to say that it has both effects.
Right, it's helpful in her political, but I think the nature, her character is always so assaulted, and I think her staff was very loyal to her, and that's for a reason. We've all had bosses, and not all of us have been so loyal.
There is no question about the depth of loyalty that the people who work for her have. It is rare, and it is greater than the loyalty that people have to her husband, which is broad and transient, and hers is deep and very committed.
question.
I have two
Yes.
questions. One's a comment and one's a question. The comment is, based on this discussion we've just been having, isn't this proof of what some of the problems of politics today actually are, which is the cult of personality that reveals so much in the cult of personality that sometimes the issues get obscured. And on the presidential level, it's who's more likable, who's like to have a beer with, all of that sort of thing. Just a comment. I know it's been talked about a lot.
Yeah, it's true.
But what's more interesting to me, you guys are two very, very seasoned journalists, wonderful journalists, and I wonder what it feels like, now that you've had a book out, to be the object of the 24-hour, news cycle. I remember when the book came out, it was a firestorm. There was a few firestorms. How did you feel about that when the story got beyond you, in a sense? Other than it was great for the book.
I've developed sensitivities that I did not know I had.
Both of us. We would have sessions where we would want to kill people, where we would want to kiss
Kill
them.
is strong.
Yeah.
Kill is strong.
No, not for me. I would want to kill them.
Well, did you feel things got misinterpreted or
Yes.
taken out of context?
Yeah, we had one. So obviously, every time something good happens, we get a note, from the publisher says you're on the New York Times bestseller list. We go.
And we
nuts.
just
We're
made
like,
it 4 weeks today, so I should.
You're elated and ebullient, like so excited, and then you read somebody's somebody's criticism, and it says that you didn't do this, you didn't do that, there wasn't enough on Benghazi, whatever the criticism is, and you go, man, I really would have liked to have talked to that person before they wrote that thing about me. And it reminds you as a reporter about what I was saying before, the importance of taking the negative to the people that you're writing about, so that they have an opportunity to discuss with you what's actually going on in their mind, what their view of it is. And sometimes they'll tell you something that's patently false. But it's important to let people have their opportunity to speak and defend themselves. And I think we both feel that even more today after having been the object of criticism than we did even before we published the book.
We could tell who's read the book and who hasn't read the book.
We can tell by some of the op-eds and some of the criticism. Like some of it's like the stuff that hurts the most is people you can tell read the book and don't like it, or don't like things about it. And then sometimes you read one and you go, this person didn't even bother to read the book. Like you can tell they didn't bother to read the book. And she's a Rorschach test. If you go look at comments on Amazon and stuff like that, not that I spend a lot of time doing that, but people who like her will be like 5 stars. People who don't like her will be like 1 star, and they won't even write a comment. You're like,
my dad has a question, so I have to call him.
I have a question, and it's more a comment, and then after that a question.
No bias allowed here, Dad.
No bias, but if the best the Republican Party can do is to point out that she has fingerprints all over the so-called Obamacare program, and that Benghazi is her fault. Not really so, but anyway, they will try to attribute it. And the Russian reset button, which they keep throwing, and I read about it. If that's the best thing they can come up with, I want you to have front seats to write about President Hillary Clinton when she comes into office.
My dad's views do not reflect mine. I should note.
Hopefully we'll still have press
journalist.
tags. Hopefully we'll still have press tags so we could sit in the front row, whoever the president is. Yes.
Recently, her remarks that were in the paper stipulated that Putin was acting like Hitler. And there was great criticism because she mentioned that. Well, thank God somebody's mentioned it, because that's exactly what Hitler was like. He walked in and took over the world. If he could, he would have. And I think that her strength and her ability to be able to say things like that are going to wake up some of the people who were told over and over again, never forget, and to allow anyone to just walk into a country and just want to take it over is absolutely forbidden and unacceptable. And she's brave enough to get up there and say it publicly. I think that speaks very highly of anything else they can say about Benghazi, which we all know is a lie, and which we won't accept. So they shouldn't accept anything but the best, and she is.
I would politely disagree.
Right, why?
I'll tell you, on a Hitler comparison, and I'm fortunate enough that my family had left Europe before Hitler came to power. My wife's grandmother just turned 100. She fled Austria during the Holocaust. I think that you can make a comparison and say that something that Putin did mirrors something that Hitler did. But because Hitler is such a powerful, not just an image, just such a powerful and emotional pull for so many people, and because what he did was so horrific, that you can make the point that Putin is taking over land, that he is unchecked, that he wants to expand his power across Europe. You can make that point, I think, in ways that are less radioactive politically and perhaps more historically accurate. However, I will say within that, if you read everything she said, the context that she put around it was important context, and I think that got lost in the discussion.
Yes.
So, yes, I think there is a reason to look at what's going on with Putin and say you've got to stand up to people who want to expand their power across whole continents or countries. But I personally would be careful evoking Adolf Hitler's name.
I personally can't agree with you, only because our generational gap, you being as young as you are, me being as old as I am.
Are you kidding me? I thought you were a younger woman. I was thinking my wife was in trouble.
I would suggest that you go back into history and take a look at what we feel very strongly about as a Jew. Jewish people would never say it's okay for him to do what he wants because he's the head of Russia, and it was his land. I mean, they broke it up. It used to be Russia. But that doesn't give him the right to walk in and just do what he pleases and what he wants and get the whole international community up in arms. And he's a very unorthodox government man, and I think we have something to be worried about with him.
I think that's a good point. It's interesting to hear that there's a divide on that, because she was heavily criticized when she said what she said, and it's interesting to hear there are people who feel that what she said was perfectly appropriate. So thank you for bringing that up.
You referred to Benghazi a couple of times. Did you ever speak to her directly about it? And if so, what was her explanation of what did transpire?
I think that we did not talk to her about it, but I think that we have a very good account of what happened in the book in terms of Washington, where she was, what she was doing abroad. We basically compiled everything. We talked to a lot of people about what had happened that night. And I think you'll hear her say that it was her biggest regret. And I think that's something that she's going to talk more about over the next year or two.
I think the layer of the onion that's impossible to peel is, if you're in charge of a department, when something goes wrong, are you to blame? Are you responsible? Are you accountable? The buck stops here. So I think I think everybody has sort of a different view of the level of culpability in that. I would argue that the people to blame for Benghazi are the terrorists that stormed the gate, first and foremost. But you're right; she was in charge of the department, and there is a buck stops here mentality in our politics, and I think that's perfectly appropriate. And I think it's something that she'll have to talk about. Should she run for president, she will find herself talking about Benghazi a lot. I think when her book comes out, you will probably get some insight into what she wants to project about what she was thinking and feeling at that time, and how what level of responsibility she feels she has. I do think that the investigation, and we go through this in the book a little bit, the investigation is somewhat focused on the wrong things, in that one of the big questions was additional security denied in Libya, and it was, but it was denied for Tripoli, not Benghazi. And there's no indication that if you had more military people instead of State Department defense, security people in Tripoli, that it would have had any effect on Benghazi. However, I think there's a really good question to be asked about whether we should have been in Libya in the first place. And she was the orchestrator internationally and domestically of the decision to go in and take out Gaddafi. I think there's a reasonable question to be asked about how much you leave diplomats out there to do diplomacy without a heavy military footprint.
And she really believed in expeditionary diplomacy. That was something that she really believed in and wanted this. She wanted it out there, and we did talk to her about that a little bit.
Folks, we have time for just 2 more quick questions, please. We have a gentleman over there.
Her health. There was an issue with, I think, blood clot, was it? She collapsed a couple years ago. I believe she'll be 69 years old in 2016, so she obviously is not as young as she was in 08.
Nor am I.
nor am I either. That's a few days ago. So, anything on her health, anything new there, any concerns there?
When we talked to her aides about this, obviously, and they all insist that she's right as rain right now. And you see her schedule. She's basically traveling every day. She's giving a speech every day. She's writing a book. She's pretty active. So I don't think, we're not seeing her kind of holed up in her house in Washington very much. So I think they're going to point to that. But we don't know exactly what's going on. I mean, her medical records, we don't know. But
I'm not a doctor, but I am staying at a Holiday Inn tonight. I don't think we'll ever know exactly what it is, but from all appearances, she seems to be, as Amie says, out there doing a lot of events. I mean, $250,000 a pop is nice. In fact, that's exactly what we were paid for tonight.
Do you think the time has come that a woman can be elected president in the United States?
Yes. I do. I mean, it has to be the right woman, and it has to be the right woman against the right candidate, man or woman on the other side. But I don't see the not that there aren't obstacles to that, but I don't see the same kind of obstacles that there have generally been to women or minority candidates. I think in some cases they can be strengths. I think Barack Obama, in fact, used being a minority as a strength, or it was a strength for him in 2008. I think we've seen a lot of candidates. The United States is just a different place today than it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. So yes, I think the United States is ready to elect a woman.
I just want to know your opinion.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
And I'd like to thank this gentleman for asking the perfect closing question. Thanks very much. Folks, we have HRC for sale at the counter